Okay.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane. I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library, and I'm here with two of my very favorite people, author Carla Kelly, who, if you've been here with me before, you know I just love her books, and she's awesome.
Thank you.
And Booklist Reviewer John Charles, who I also really get such a kick out of. He's done a couple of programs with us, recommending romance books because he reviews romance books, and he is the most non-judgmental person I've ever spoken to. And so I really look forward to those as well. So before we get started, I just want to say a couple of things. I want to say thanks to the Friends of the Ashland Public Library for supporting all of our programs. We couldn't do this fun stuff without them. And I'd like to thank Carla and John who let us share this program with other libraries. 18 of them signed up to share this program with their patrons. And if you would like, this is a little bit different. We're going to be doing something a little bit different today. If you'd like to buy signed books by Carla, you can do that at Aesop's Fable, our local indie bookstore. She sent them book plates because we're going to be talking about some specific books today, A Naval Surgeon to Fight For, and Carla's most recent Christmas stories, Regency Glad Tidings. And the other different thing we're going to be doing today is John is going to be in the hot seat to interview Carla and ask her all kinds of fascinating and interesting questions. And I am going to sit back, relax, and enjoy with you all. So I'm going to be off screen, but if you have questions, I will moderate them after they talk for about 30, 40 minutes. Feel free to use the chat to chat with each other. And if anything funny or interesting comes up, I will mention that after their talk. John, Carlos, thank you so much for being here. I can't tell you how much been looking forward to this.
Well,
All
thank
right,
you. When
I'm out. Enjoy. I'll be back in about 30 or 40 minutes.
Okay.
I could not have been more honored when Mina asked me to participate in this with Carla Kelly because she is one of my favorite authors. I discovered her far more years in the past than either of us want to acknowledge. But with
Tell
her
me.
book, it was Miss Whittier Makes a List, and I just happened upon it
Oh,
in
there
the
you go.
bookstore, took it home, and immediately fell in love with the world she created and the books that she has written since then.
Oh, thank you.
Carla is known for her impeccable attention to period detail, for her insightful characterization, and for her ability to bring the reader back into the past while also entertaining them. So I first would like to thank you for all the wonderful stories you've created, Carla.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know about you, John, but I kind of just stumble into stuff in life.
Mhm.
Um, I think, boy, that'd be a good story. Maybe I ought to write a story.
Well, before we talk about Carla the writer, let's talk about Carla the person, because you have a rather interesting biography. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, it's interesting. I go back. I've written a lot about the Royal Navy,
Mhm.
and and part of that is a big part of that because my dad was in the U.S. Navy, and we were Navy brats, traveled around, moved every 3 years or so, and it was part of my life in a way that I wasn't even aware of at the time, because only recently, my parents are both gone now. I have two sisters. We've been discussing some of the things that Dad never talked about, but we found about in other ways. He was in World War II, Vietnam, and no, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And there was so much of what he did. We eventually figured out that he was involved heavily in sub chasing, things like that. In the very early days when they did it with binoculars, looking out of planes,
Wow.
and and found out some things that I I'll give you an example. My younger sister lived close to where my dad was before he passed, and she said once he told me, I've never been so frightened as when I never ran so fast as when I was carrying a wounded pilot on my back trying to stay ahead of the Chinese army.
Hmm.
This just popped out of him when he was about 85. Well, it turns out a few years, and I just came across it recently. The unit he was in, Helicopter Squadron One, was went behind enemy lines to do precisely that, and he never mentioned any of that. And we knew if we heard something, you can tell we learned not to repeat anything. If somebody asked what my dad did, well, I say he's in the Navy.
Mhm.
And somehow that affected my writing more than I was aware of. And I think about that now, and I'm so grateful for all that he taught me and didn't tell me. But yeah, I went to college. I've got 2 degrees in history, and I was a seasonal park ranger at 2 historic sites, and that all played a part. Um, when I was stop me if I'm boring you, but when
Yeah.
when I was I worked at Fort Laramie National Historic Site, and we did living history. I did the ranger thing with the big hat and the lecture under the trees. But we would sit in these restored officers' homes, enlisted men, the quarters, and talk to visitors as though they were in our world, which was, say, a good example was 1876. And I would get so many comments from women in particular. What was life like for the wives and children? So that's what got me writing. I thought, I can do this. I did a lot of journalism writing, and believe it or not, high school. That's where I learned it all. My teacher there was a dragon, and she made us work. She made us work hard, and we hated her slash loved her. But so I did. I wrote a story based on total fact of information I had, and I called it Mary Murphy. She was a laundress with one of the companies there stationed at Fort Laramie. And the story is told from the point of view of a lieutenant who's just out of the point, green as grass. And he has to deal with some situations that involve her, and he just doesn't know if he can. Uh, he's just trying to learn his job. And I sold it. It had kind of a flowery ending. Um, he goes off to another place eventually and marries and all this. But it was too flowery, and for 30 years, that ending wasn't right, and I knew it wasn't. Then it was finally being anthologized with by Texas Christian University Press, a really cool press. And I took that story out again that I've been thinking about for 30 years, and all of a sudden I had it. It was 9 words, 3 non-sentences, perfect. But I worried about that for 30 years. Why do we do that? But that's so my background is that. And I've had some interesting jobs. And this is reflected kind of in what my writing. I seem to write a lot about medical things lately. Because I worked at a hospital in hospital public relations at a big hospital in Southwest Missouri, and then worked at a hospice. You can learn a lot in the hospice.
Mhm.
And then I always try to kind of put it back in the past because my big interest is history, and getting it right. That really matters to me. I care about that a lot, and I think about it a lot. Got one good story for you here. I have an old friend. I'd written Mrs. McBenney's London Season, and it's about actually that's a family name, Jane McBenney, but she's come to London to help out in a family. There's a daughter that's going to have a come out, and a younger son who's kind of bothering everybody. So she takes him to the Tower of London with a guidebook to look around, and she says, and here, this is where Mary Queen of Scots lost her head. The story goes on. Years later, I have a friend. He's passed now too. He was in academic theater, and the phone rang one day, and I picked it up. He didn't entertain. He didn't say who he was. His voice is very distinctive, and he said, "Mrs. Kelly, don't you know that Mary Queen of Scots died in Fotheringay Castle?" Then click, down with the phone. And I looked it up, and by golly, Don was right. and and I thought, and nobody all those years had ever called me on it. But Don did, because he knows me. But through the magic of reprints, when it came time to reprint that for Epicenter Press, Camel Press, I corrected it. And that made me feel better. Yeah, history matters to me. It really does.
Your first couple of published stories were Western historicals set in the West. and then you decided to switch to Regency England. I think your first novel was Daughter of Fortune. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, that's set in this, well, uh, not terribly far from where you are, really, but I was in New Mexico.
Mhm.
And yeah, um, it just interested me. I'd done a lot of research on the Spanish Southwest, as other stuff I'd written that wasn't fiction, and so I wrote this, and Donald I Find published it. Now they're, I think, part of Penguin Putnam now, whatever. Anyway, and it did moderately well. It was my first novel. I'd written, like I say, a series of short stories about the Indian Wars, one of which was Mary Murphy, and um, I'd gone to some Western Writers of America conference, and I actually got in touch with an agent, and I wrote this, and I can't even remember quite the sequence. I sent it to her, and she told me what I needed to change about it to make it work, and that's the interesting thing now. And a part of the problem, this is the point where you got this baby you've written, and I say that I have at that point I think I had 5 children, and 2 of them were really little, and I was working full time, and I didn't have a lot of time. And my short stories, like I said, had done well with their audience. And here's this novel about something I'd not written about before, but I she told me exactly what I needed to do to sell this. And here's the deal: this is my baby. It took me a long time to write it, getting up very early in writing. And if I listened to her, I knew I could sell that though. So I did what she said. And sure enough, so I learned a valuable lesson there. When there's somebody that knows a whole lot more than you do, listen to them. And yeah, and then after I wrote that, and it did fairly well, the fact that I was totally unknown, and still am. Um, I asked her, well, Eileen, what do I do next? And she said, have you ever thought about writing a Regency romance? I said, well, I really like Jane Austen quite a bit. And there was one other writer, can't Marion Chesney.
Yes, I loved her
I
book.
liked her writings. I really
Yeah.
did. I enjoyed those. And I said, well, that's about the extent of it. She said, I'll send you. Well, she sent me several novels to read so I could get an idea of just what that was. And that's how I get started with Signet. And in my inimitable style, I think, well, that was fun. Let's try another one. And then I ended up writing an awful lot of short stories. I still do. I enjoy writing short stories. They're in some ways they're more challenging because you have to say a lot with less, and you can't. I'm not going to say waste words. That's not the word I want. But you don't have that
The
feel. It's a
luxury of
totally different feeling. You know what I'm talking about.
yeah.
And so that's kind of where it went from there. And then how did I end up writing for Harlequin? I don't know. But I've done that now, and I've got I tell you what, this makes me really shallow, John, but I love saying, oh, I emailed my London editor the other day.
Mhm.
And she's been very helpful. And I enjoy that. And then I write for Epicenter Press in Seattle, and I write for um, a couple of writers who are based in Utah. I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that pays into part of what I write and how I write and why I do it. And so I have some connections there that I write for them. And so that's where it is now. And I'm 77, and why am I still doing this?
Well, I think it's because it's in your blood. You're a writer and you have to do it. But I think it's fascinating that you mentioned Marion Chesney because I discovered her Regencies around the time I discovered yours, and she also did books that didn't focus on the expected characters, the
Yeah.
Duke and the heiress and things like that. She brought you behind the scenes as you did. In fact, I think at one point you had told someone about why you wrote the kind of Regencies you did. You said, "Hey, don't you realize there's a wider world out there than almanacs, and some serious world events are underway." So when
Yeah.
you wrote your traditional Regencies when you started for Signet, you were exploring in many ways aspects of England and the Regency world that romance readers had not seen before. Was that just because you were fascinated by the middle class, the lower class, the war that was going on? You didn't just want to go and see the dances and the balls?
Well, partly it's because I'm a very logical person and I've studied enough about history to know that, my word, there are not that many lords and ladies.
Yes.
And it seems like some writers just kind of trip over them. And I think, oh, there's so much more interesting people out there.
Mhm.
There really are. And like you say, and they are. I know I'm kind of known for writing what they call Booklist Regencies,
Yeah.
and I'm very happy doing that. Readers seem to not mind because there's so much more to draw from. After a while, I don't want to turn it into a total formula, and I hope I'm not doing that with some of my Navy stories. But yeah, those are the people that interest me, because they're not the ones that everybody writes about. See, I don't read a lot of romance or Regency romance or anything. Partly I did it on purpose, so it would never influence me. It never has. So I do what I like.
One of the other things I've discovered about your books is that there's a lot of research that goes into writing these compact stories. And sometimes you spend a lot of time just getting one small fact right because that's the kind of person you are. Can you talk a little bit about research?
Well, yeah, I speak at a lot of book clubs. Well, not so many now, but a lot of them. And I did a PowerPoint, and I have this picture of an iceberg. You know the old story. The iceberg part you see, and the part underneath can be as much as 10 times greater than what's on top. And stuff underneath is the research. And because I'm a historian, that matters to me. I want to get it right. And so that means an awful lot of reading. Give you an example. I wrote a novel called My Loving Vigil Keeping. Have you ever read that?
I don't think I have. I'll have to look at my bookshelf.
I'll tell you, you'd remember it if you had, because we had just moved to Utah from North Dakota. My husband retired; he's a professor up there, one of the
Mhm.
universities, and we were living in a place called close to Schofield, Utah. And it's May 1st, 1900 it's called the Schofield mine disaster, when 200 men and boys died in a mine explosion there in Utah. And we lived close to there. And in fact, we had a picnic up there, not in that area, near there from where we lived in central Utah. And I was talking to our bishop's wife. He happened to be a coal miner. And there had been a mine disaster about 2 years prior to when we moved there. And so I asked, I said, Margaret, um, what's it like? I mean, because I was talking to her about that fairly recent mine disaster. And she told me this. She said her husband was also, Brad was in charge of what they call mine rescue. These different mines in the area are well trained in how to go into a mine that's collapsed or something has happened there and get people out if they can. And so I mentioned that one that happened 2 years earlier, and I said, Margaret, tell me about it. I'm a good interviewer. I never go for the yes or no answer. So Margaret did. She said she heard about this had happened, so she turned on the television, and I guess there was a stringer from CNN that had come down there and was taking pictures. And he took just a few exteriors. Of course, no one was going in except mine rescue. And she said, and the picture she saw was her husband going into that mine. And they go in on what they call the level, and they're in a kind of a squashed down looking pickup, small, and people in there with them. And that was the only footage they had, but they showed that all afternoon. And she said, I said, well, Margaret, how did you deal with that personally? Because there's your husband going into a mine that's collapsed. And of that mine, there were 6 miners who died, and 3 of the rescuers died later on. And they never got those bodies out, any of them. And I said, what was that like? And she said, Carla, that was the longest day of my life. And I knew I had a story there and I knew nothing about coal mining. And I had other contracts. But through the next 2.5 years, as I'm writing other stuff, which, that's what I do. Everything I'd hear about the Schofield mine, I put it in a basket, everything. I got this huge basket. Finally, I had a little time to start doing the research. And then comes the hard part. Where do you tell a story like that? How do you tell it? Do you tell it somebody that was in the disaster? Do you begin with the disaster? Do you do it at the end? There's so many ways to do it. And what I wanted was an outsider who happened to be a school teacher. She had come for her own reasons on kind of a whim. And she's trying to learn something about mining, coal mining. She was familiar with hard rock mining as the story goes on. But so then she's the one who asks the questions, and so you don't spend pages, you're not writing a treatise about, always have to keep, the important thing is the story. So, and then I told it from her point of view, and yeah, it worked. But all that research for a book, a book, I think you'd enjoy it. It's a pretty good story. But
Well,
yeah, that's all that goes into writing is where do you begin? How do you tell a mine disaster story? Go big or go home or blow up or what. But the thing is, John, and I'm sure you discovered this in your life, you can. You can do it. Even when you find yourself in a spot thinking, what now? What now? I just sit calmly and think, okay, Carla, you can do this because you've done it before. And that keeps me going. And I probably wandered all off your subject there, but
no, it's a wonderful story, which brings me to my next topic for you. You're known for your impeccably researched historical novels, historical romances, but you're also known for your holiday tales. And I discovered those back when you were writing for Signet as well. Why did you kind of make that part of your repertoire? Is it your own personal love of the holidays? Was it more of a commercial kind of thing they sell? So I'm going to write them because they're really beautifully written. Every holiday story you've done is really captures the
they're kind
spirit.
of, I got to tell you, John, and I think you know Jennifer McCord, don't you?
Yes.
She loves Christmas stories. So it was kind of Jennifer that got me onto
Wow.
Christmas stories. I've written, I did a lot for Signet. People would ask me, would you write a Christmas story? I think, oh yeah, I can try that. So you think, oh yeah, that was fun. I'll do another one. But yeah, I just started, and she always wants Christmas stories. So I've discovered how much fun they are because I do like writing short stories or novellas, 25,000 words, And, but I think, let me see. We hold up the book.
Yeah, Regency Glad Tidings.
And of all these stories, the first one was so much fun because I mean, and I read a lot about doctors, and I've written about the battle, about Waterloo, and what happens to these patients that aren't getting out of there, and they're still stuck in Belgium. But the doctor is trapped with a patient who refuses to leave. He's a hypochondriac. It was his specialty, and he's constantly complaining. And this, have you ever met somebody that just won't go away?
Yes.
That's this guy. So you get a premise like that, and you can work all kinds of fun things into it. And so finally, he's forced to go home with this man, take him back to Yorkshire. He's trying, and what those men did, the surgeons, because they weren't officers, they were part of the medical department. They would contact Wellington and say, please, may I be released? And he would give them a release once the battles were over. Typically, I mean, once the war ended. So he just can't, he gets a release, but this man just refuses to, he's a very spoiled son
Yeah.
of a guy who's like a commander of the Yorkshire Fifth Foot. But he goes back there and he meets the fiance of this guy, this hypochondriac, and oh my goodness. So there we go. Oh, it was just fun to write. You think, how much can you pile on? That's not the right word, but how much can you just make it turn a little tighter, twist it a little harder until you got your readers turning the pages.
I think every one of the stories, there's three in Regency Glad Tidings, everyone really showcases your, I'm going to say, remarkable ability to see people for who they are, not just the surface, but who they are internally and what makes them special. And yours are some of the most romantic stories I've ever read, and it has nothing to do with physical appearance. It's with the connection someone has with another person at that level. You see people for all their flaws and all their wonderful qualities. And you write these characters that readers really can identify with. I love the second story because you're one of the few Regency writers that bring Americans into your story. It's like
Oh
the
yeah.
whole world is just England, and you say, no, there was our American cousins. So we get this
Yes.
courtship.
Oh, that's true, and it's a kind of a fraught time. This was after
Yeah.
the
War
War
of
of
18.
1812, and he's trying to get back because because American shipping just about fell apart during the War of 1812 for all the reasons that it did, and so these people are just, they're just desperate to get back doing what they do, and he's trying his hardest, and yeah, he was a fun character. But I'll tell you something. Um, I'm an observer of people. I have been all my life for one reason in particular. I don't do it quite so much, but I had a pretty significant stammer when I was younger. And I would kind of envy people that were so fluent in their speech. And I started just observing them, saying, how do they say that? Is there some way I could do that? But the thing is, when you have a stammer, in my case anyway, my folks were just the greatest parents. I discovered pretty early, I started reading at a pretty young age, that there are so many ways I could say a word that I could say. Some initial sounds are still hard for me, but there are so many different words out there. So I had a fabulous vocabulary by the time I was 6 or 7, just trying to find a way to be able to express myself without stammering all over the place. And so this turned me into an observer a lot, how people talked, what they said, how they looked. And I've just always been interested in people. So put those together, and that's kind of how it went with me. That something is, it was always kind of hard because we moved around frequently. And sure enough, teachers always, back in the day, they'd want you all to read a little bit. We'd read everybody in the class, and I know they'd come to me and I'd stammer, and I did. So, and then I'd wait. About 2 weeks later, my mom would get a call from the speech pathologist, and I'd go in there. And nobody understands stuttering. They really don't. It's some kind of a synapse in the brain that doesn't quite function. But that, I am grateful now
Mhm.
because it gave me words and it made me see people that I might not have really noticed before.
That's wonderful. Um, Before we have to turn it over to other questions, you've seen a lot of changes in publishing as you've been writing books. Um, Presses come and go, publishers and imprints rise and fall.
Mhm.
What have you learned about publishing that you wish someone had told you when you were starting out as a writer?
I don't know what it is about publishers, but starting out, and even I don't even care now, but starting out, that first book, I didn't know anything,
Mm.
and I realized if you don't have the right question, to ask, they're not going to tell you. They're not going to just spill the beans. Well, you know what I'm talking about. I know you do.
Yeah.
They're not just going to say, oh, let me fill you in on how we do it. No, they will only answer the question you ask. And if you don't know what to ask, you're pretty well screwed.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right? Is that fair?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's even more so today. Well, I guess it was probably true back then. Authors really have to be their own advocate. There's no one else that's really going to
Oh,
champion them
that's true.
or steer them down the right path. I mean, their editors can be wonderful. There are many fine publishers out there, like Camel Press, which has brought back into print some of your classic
Oh,
books,
yeah.
which is
They've been
wonderful.
sweet.
Yeah, but I think it was another writer that said, writing is not for sissies, and it's not something you really have to be tough to get out there and champion your work.
You really do. Well, you know what it's like. I mean, you just you have to feel you have something to say that only you can say it in a certain way. And I think that's been the case. I've got a writing style, and I think now that's mine, and I like it. I don't like I say I don't read a lot of hardly any romance. I don't need to because I know what I want to say, and I do it. And that's like I say, I kind of stumble through life thinking, well, that was good. I'll try it again. Oh, I got to show you one more thing.
Sure.
A naval surgeon to fight for. I'll tell you why this sold. That guy has killer dimples.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good cover never hurts a book. That's certainly
never
true.
does.
I think readers, when they're in bookstores or grocery stores or wherever they're buying their books, you have like 2 or 3 seconds to grab their attention with the cover, and they're
That's
on
it.
something else. So
Mm-hmm.
we don't like to say it, but covers can sell a book.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Did you ever get you over the course of your writing career, did you ever get an editor or a publisher who said to you, Carla, we love your books, but we wish you'd write more mainstream kinds of stories?
Nope.
No, that's great.
Nope. And yet I wrote it's mainstream for me a two book story about set in World War II. Um,
Right, that one of
which
them was set in Wyoming, wasn't it?
yeah, not far from where we lived. In fact, I know exactly. I could write that. I mean, I've been there. I know it very well. And and I know some of those people, some of those German men that came back after the war because they liked it there and they married into local families. And I got really lucky there because my husband taught there, and I that's when I worked at Fort Laramie, and my husband taught at a community college, and became friends with one of the professors of history there, and I called Don up when I was getting ready to write this. I said, Don, here's what I'm doing. Do you know anybody who might still be alive that remembers that time? And he said, yeah, I have coffee with him every morning. So that afternoon, I was on the phone to this wonderful gentleman who their farm was right next to the PW camp. And in the story, I include a dog, and he said, yeah, our dog loved going over there because the prisoners loved to feed him. And so these little details that you get from people, just the little stuff. Part of it is getting when you interview somebody, is getting them to relax, ask the right questions, don't interfere, carry on. I learned how to do that from my journalism teacher in high school, and then how to ask questions that you don't have a list of this. You give a basic start, and then the next question comes. You feed it off what they told you, and on they go. And when I did worked in a hospital, there were a lot of doctors I interviewed. The first question they always asked was, how long is this going to take? And I say 20 minutes. Well, yeah, right. But then I get them talking, and it was far more than 20 minutes. And one doctor, what did he say? Uh, he, he said, Carla, I'm told it was a sensitive subject, and I always, when they tell me that, I always I'll put my hands out, put in my lap. I say I won't write it down. and I won't repeat it if you don't want me to. But and I never did. But he said, I've told you stuff I've never told anybody. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, Carla, you're so non-threatening. So I learned from all these people, like these techniques, and it's never failed me. And I'm so grateful for the people that have let me interview them and that have enjoyed my writing and tell me they've enjoyed it, and all that stuff just makes me happy.
Wonderful. I'm not sure. Yep, here comes Nina.
Here I am, paying attention.
So I had one more thing I wanted to mention, but that's okay. I don't think we have time.
Oh, go ahead.
I've heard from a lot of readers who they're rereading my books because they make them feel good in tough times. And I had an experience with that. I was a ranger out at Fort Union Trading Post, and I happened to be there during 9/11 when it was a Tuesday, and I was on duty. And the park service goes into all kinds of stuff like it happens. There are certain reactions, things you have to do, and I won't repeat any of those. But all I wanted to do was to go home. I lived on the other side of the state, so Saturday morning I'm home after this horrible week, and all I wanted to do was go downstairs and pick up my favorite book and just hold it in my hand. And I brought it just a minute. Did you ever read the Lawrenceville Stories by Owen Johnson? Wrote in 1880, 1890. It's about Lawrenceville, the prep school. And it has some wonderful 3 major stories about the prodigious Hickey and the varmint. And I love these stories. It's my favorite book. So I went downstairs. I just picked that book up and I held it in my hands. Took a deep breath and I felt better. Then I went upstairs with the book in my hand and I made myself a big pot of cheese grits and hot sauce. So I was happy girl now. I had my book and I had my cheese grits and hot sauce. So yeah, books help us get through tough times.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
That is so true. I read and reread all the time when I'm down. And
yeah.
I'd like to reread when I'm down because then I know that I'll like the book.
Yeah, there's no surprise coming up. It's going to make you unhappy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wow. So thank you for that wonderful discussion of your books. John, I know you have another program to get ready for, so you are welcome to stay and hang out with us. But if you need to go, I won't keep you.
That's sweet. I'll stay for a little bit because Carla's fascinating. So,
well, John, I really have this urge to interview you sometime. Just sit down with you. If you're in Scottsbluff, I'm not that far away.
I can go down there. I can go off screen. I can go off screen again if you guys want to chat some more.
Oh no, that's okay. But really, I would like to meet you in person.
I'm delighted. I'd love to get my book signed.
Oh my goodness.
Were we going to talk about your other new book? Was it Nina? The Surgeons.
Mm-hmm.
Now the title's escaping me.
Oh, it's a Harlequin title. A Naval Surgeon to Fight For.
There you go. Yes.
Tell you what I did. I love writing for Harlequin for some reasons. And they let me I don't have to go into great detail in some of the physical stuff because I'm not going to. It doesn't bother them. But the titles, they're pretty awful at times. And after a certain number of books, I finally quit putting a title on the book because there wasn't any point. They were going to change it. One time, and I meant this, and I think they knew it, I'd written a story set at Fort Laramie in 1877 with a surgeon. And it's a subject I knew very well because I worked there in those buildings. So everything I'm writing about, it's there. And I gave it a title. Let me see, what do I call it? There was an officer's wife's taken from an officer's wife's memoir. And one second, got to find it real quick.
It's like me. I like to have all of my books around me. That's how
I can't find it.
home.
I can't find it. But it was the perfect title. Because it was from the period. It was a very romantic sounding title too. Well, they contacted me through email. All this is email. They said, well, we want to call it their title. And I emailed them back and I said, and I meant it. I said, if you change this title, I will never write for you again.
Yep.
I mean, I did, and I meant it. And I guess it came through, and they didn't change the title. But I didn't press my luck again. and I'm okay with that. But that one story, because I knew that place and what I was talking about, and the subject, and more than they did. Mm-hmm. Anyway, my story.
You did say, Carla, earlier that you had been sort of focused on the naval aspect of your books recently. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, it's because I know a lot about the Navy because of my dad's service in the U.S. Navy and some of the things he did, which we didn't learn about till much later. And there's so much we'll never know. But we learned not to ask and not to tell anything. And that gets me in trouble sometimes. But yeah, I just find it interesting because nobody else writes about it. And maybe I will. People seem to read them. So, in fact, I'm working on another one now for Harlequin, which is set just after the Battle of Trafalgar, when the U.S. Navy and the Royal Navy were all kind of there in the Mediterranean Sea. And the U.S. Navy had signed an agreement with the Tripolitan pirates, so they're in Tripoli. And so the Royal Navy's kind of wondering, well, what are you guys doing? So that's part of the story. But yeah, it's an interesting subject to me. People seem to read them, so.
I think it's hilarious that you've done all this research and you know your topic and all that stuff, and that people buy the book because of the dimple.
Well, I looked at that and I thought, oh, he's cute.
I would totally go for that cover.
Oh yeah, it's a great cover.
I did have a couple of questions from people. This is just if you remember all of your books and every scene in them, Anne wants to know, which is the book that has a scene of the heroine sitting behind a church listening to a performance of Messiah? None of us could, I'm sure somebody in the audience could have answered that, but I did not know the answer to that.
I don't remember. If it's a short story, I've written so many of those. I really don't remember. I'm embarrassed to admit that.
We have been challenged to figure this out, everybody. So
okay. I will try to take a look and see if I can, and I'll let you know, Mina.
Okay, and I'll let you all know. This is a really great question because I don't know if all you know that Carla actually made her way out to Massachusetts last year for our RomCon in May. I tell everybody, oh, it's a short story. That's a clue. Okay. I tell everybody that she took trains, planes, and automobiles to be with us. So we have a question of when you were in Ashland last spring, you mentioned that you hope to visit the last of the 50 states here in the Northeast. Did you?
Well, no, we didn't get to Vermont. As soon as I left you, I think I introduced her to you. She's my roommate from college, and we were in Hooksett, New Hampshire, and I did a stupid, Gaffy's dumb thing that anybody out west will do. We're used to traveling great distances between states, so the first thing I said, Susan, would we have time to just go into Maine because I've never been there? And she said, Carla, we'll be there in 20 minutes. I thought, oh wow. So we got into Maine. I love Maine. I wish I could afford to live there. And then a lot of New Hampshire, and then back to Massachusetts because I wanted to see those mills where the mill girls worked. Mm-hmm. There could be a book there someday. And but then we never got over to Vermont. It was only about 90 miles. So I'm still missing one state, but I will go back because I will go to Vermont.
Okay. Sheila says that, yeah, she hopes you make it because it is beautiful there.
Oh yeah.
So one of the things you said to us before we started this talk was that you don't necessarily read romance. So Sheila wants to know who are a few of your favorites who are writing now and in the past, like a couple of your favorite writers.
You put me, oh, I really enjoyed The Midnight Library by Matt Haig.
Mhm.
Oh, great book. And yeah, I like that sort of thing. And then I mentioned Shelby Van Pelt, Remarkably Bright Creatures. And then the nonfiction, I honestly read more nonfiction. I'm asking myself because I really read a lot of nonfiction. Part of that's research.
Mhm.
A whole hunk of it. So I really can't. Yeah. You put me on the spot here.
We do like to flummox you.
Well, you did. It's like I really do. I have a lot of favorite historians. David McCullough was a favorite of mine. Huh. And I did my master's thesis on another favorite, a guy named Robert Utley, who wrote about the Indian Wars, history of the Indian Wars, lots of books, those things. Yeah,
Mhm.
I like that. That's what I read.
Sandy wants to know how many of your books are in audio because I've read a lot of them, like books and ebooks, and I only listen to books that I've already read. So I want to listen to your book. So are they all or most in audio?
Very few, very few. Because well, the Regencies I bought kind of recently. Uh, I was writing for Cedar Fort in Utah, and it was a small press, and some of the books did very well. And they put out Reforming Lord Ragsdale, which is a very popular book. And I mean, they did that as an audio. When I gave them the rights to those books, which I'd gotten back from Signet. And My Loving Vigil Keeping, that one I mentioned to you about the mine disaster. There are very few, but I must say, A Naval Surgeon to Fight For will be out in June as an audio.
Okay.
And so yeah, and they seem to like that. I just kind of caught me. I'm not. There are a few others, but I can't recall what they are.
Mhm.
I just don't
Well,
pay attention.
I had mentioned in the chat that Ragsdale is my very favorite book of yours, and Sandy just said that she just bought Reforming Lord Ragsdale in audio. So I'm gonna have to
Okay,
do the
good.
same. And Sheila says that you might like West with Giraffes. We just read that in one of our book clubs, and she said if you'll
You
like
know,
it if you like the octopus book.
I got I got about three-fourths of the way through it, then I quit. Um, I I can't really tell you why, because it was a good book, but I guess I don't know.
John, what do you like to read when you're not
Yeah,
reviewing?
Oh, well, I still read romance, even when I don't review it, historical fiction, um, mysteries, suspense, thrillers, some fantasy, but not a whole lot just because there isn't much time. The problem is not what don't I read, where can I find time to read more? I'm not that fast a reader, so which is why I loved Carla's books because you don't waste words. I mean, every word you put into the story serves a purpose. So you get a beautifully crafted book, but you're not having to kind of sort through things that are extra, I guess, to the
see,
story.
that's part of my journalism, and
Uh,
you learn how to edit type. And yeah, my journalism teacher in high school, I realize now she was training us as though we were an actual newsroom. And yeah, and the greatest honor I've ever had in writing, and I've gotten some nice ones, was my senior year. I was associate editor. I was in charge of feature writing. Imagine, and we were doing a series called oh Texas tours. What could you? I went to high school in Texas. What could you see in South Texas on a tank of gas? So not too far from where we were down there in Beeville, Texas. My dad was stationed there at the Naval Air Station. Is a place called Presidio La Bahia. It's an old Spanish fort, and it's attached to a church that's still an active Catholic church. And there's some very famous things in Texas history that happened at Presidio La Bahia during the Texas War for Independence. So I wrote this article about what it was like to go there, and I interviewed the archaeologist. The Catholic Diocese of Corpus Christi had started. Well, they were restoring that old Presidio. It's attached to the church. So I interviewed him, long interview, and I wrote this up and I turned it into Miss Jean Dugal, Miss D, put it on her desk, and then deadlines coming up, and I finally it appeared back on my desk. Nothing had been touched, and this is not like Miss D. She would be red and bloody, and she could be mean as can be, and so I got my courage up and I said, Miss D, did you have time to read it? And she said, yes. And I said, well, you didn't put anything on it. And she said, no. She said, Carla, it stands as written.
Yeah.
Step. That's the greatest thing that ever happened in my writing career. It stands as written.
Wow.
So that's how I learned.
Wow. I wish I had a teacher that told me something like that. And it's amazing too
Yeah.
with your long career that that's the thing that stands out because like you said, you've gotten other awards and stuff, but you must have been like 17, 18, and it was probably
Yep,
a
exactly.
couple, 3 years ago. So
Well,
it's
to
amazing.
give you some idea of the quality of our newspaper, um, the year I was a junior or a sophomore, excuse me, the state of Texas decided to try something, University Interscholastic League. They said, let's lump every newspaper in the state of Texas, every newspaper, all different levels of schools. We were, I think, a 3A, not very big enough, with a 6As, and I'll lump them all together and we'll pick the best one in the state. We won it that first year. It was that kind of a newspaper. Best in the entire state of Texas. Yeah, so yeah, I learned from the best.
Amazing. Paula says, I'm going to read her whole thing because it's really interesting. First, she wants to say thank you for sharing how you cope with the week of 9/11. That really touched me deeply. Very nice to meet you and learn about this genre. I recently attended a Regency dance class and will read some of your books to enhance the learning experience. I've not read much romance, so I'm wondering what type of Harlequin books do your books fit into? And John, you can pipe in here too, because I don't think, Carla, your books fit into any like subgenre of Harlequin. I mean, they really stand alone.
They really don't.
They
They
do,
do.
but I'm going to say something, and you can disagree with me. But I think Harlequin historical often doesn't get credit for the authors and the stories they publish. There's this perception that it's Harlequin and that every book is exactly the same and crafted in this formula. You'd be surprised that I mean they do Viking historicals and Edwardian and all 1920s and all these other and books like Carla. So someone at Harlequin is open to books that are a little bit different, and I say good for them.
Mhm.
I agree.
Mhm. I
I
guess when
agree.
I say that they don't fit in, we talked about this a little bit a while ago, is that, or you and John talked about it, is that you were writing about the Dukeless books, when everybody was writing about Dukes, except for me, and even Mary Bellog, who I love, all of her
Yeah.
books had some sort of
Yeah.
aristocracy in them. Yours did not. Like, Libby's London Merchant. I mean, just I could go on and on. They're just they're always different, and that's what I don't see happening in any publishing house is. But they're obviously Harlequin has really and Signet really took a chance on you.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did. I'm glad they did. I used some Dukes and Lords in some of those earlier books too, but then I guess I got bored with it and thought, nah, there's a whole lot more out there. And part of that's just because I study history. There's so much more than just this superficial layer. It's all
Mhm.
down there. You got to dig it. You got to dig it out though.
But your lords and dukes didn't always end up with the other main character. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but yeah, that first time I read one of your books where like the who you thought the heroine was going to end up with, and she didn't, and I was like,
Oh,
I was blown away because I'd never seen that.
Libby's London Merchant.
Yes. All right,
Go
spoiler.
ahead and tell it. Oh yeah, she married the right guy though,
Yes, she did.
and he had a chance in his book, the
Hmm.
next one, which was turned out to be a very hard story to write because we have a woman who's been terribly treated,
Hmm.
but he realizes, no, she went through it. She's good. I've been through a lot. I'm good too. Yeah.
What was the purpose of that, though? Like, what did you see in your readership that you felt, that we would be open to the Duke not getting the girl or the hardships that people had to go through in real life?
This is going to sound strange. I don't think about my readers because I've done this enough to where I feel confident they'll follow me. And I won't take them down a road that doesn't work because I can't do that. I'm an optimistic person. I think most historians are, weirdly enough. And no, I think I trust my readers. I do. And they've never disappointed me. Oh, I do remember a couple of my favorite writers. I like crime fiction, Michael Connolly and Robert Crace and Peter Robinson. The Brits are really good. Yeah, that's what I like.
Oh, wow. Um, I appreciate that though, that you trust your readers to
I
understand
do.
that you're not gonna, and maybe part of what we do, and feel free to pipe in the chat, is because we know that you're not gonna just give us the same old as
Well,
everybody else.
I might have maybe I've written about all the Royal Navy I need to for a while, but I don't know. There's always another angle. So I do. I trust my readers,
Mhm.
and I trust me.
That's saying a lot, and especially in publishing where people can be pretty brutal. I've seen.
Oh yeah, probably so.
Yeah. I mean, if you just ignore all of it and just write, then obviously we will read whatever you put out there.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I don't ever want to betray that trust either. So it matters to me. I
Mhm.
care.
Mhm. Sandy says that she'll buy anything that you write. I'm with her.
Well, it's the oddest thing. It's been a few years now, but I finally noticed, I'm kind of slow at this, um, that all of a sudden my name is larger than the title. And I thought, well, in my ignorance, oh, why? She said, well, because it's a Carla Kelly book. And I thought, really? Really? Gee. And I'm just bumbling around in this whole world.
Well, you've made a difference and an impact because I do think some of your books are ones that I would pick up if I was feeling sad or down, just to hold, just to have with my cup of tea. So
Oh, yeah.
I appreciate that.
And if you can have cheese grits and hot sauce while you're reading it again, it makes you feel extra good. Get all the comfort in there you can.
That sounds like a good comfort food, although I think I would probably eat potato chips, just me. How about
Well, I
you?
tell you,
What's your comfort
one
food?
of my favorite things to eat is samosa. Oh, oh,
Oh,
oh.
mine too. Mine too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Jen, what do you pick up when you're feeling down?
In terms of literature,
Hmm.
Yeah.
children's books actually are a big comfort. If you read something like Charlotte's Web or um, Walter Brooks books or Edward Eager is
Mhm.
another I loved. So I think sometimes if you just go back to what made you happy when you were a young reader, you can re-experience that.
Oh,
Oh, I agree.
that's really nice. Okay, we are just about out of time, and I just want to say thank you, John, of course, for pitch hitting for me. I really appreciate it, and you did a fabulous job. I'm going to have you interview everybody from now on, if you're free to do
No,
all.
I enjoyed
I,
meeting you, John. What a pleasure.
it was my honor, Carla, and I could never take your place, Mina. You have depths that I can only imagine.
No, I just giggle a lot. That's my superpower. But no, Carla is not the same Carla Kelly who writes vegan cookbooks. I think that must be somebody else. Um,
Yeah. I think I've been a vegetarian for about 20 minutes once, and that was
Same. All right. Have a great night, everybody. Happy reading,
Thank
John
you.
and Carla. Thank you so much. I'm sure I'll be in touch again.
Thank you,
thank you. I
Mina.
enjoyed this. Had a lot of
Thank you,
fun.
Carla.
Take
Have a
care.
great, Have a good day, everyone.